Hey guys, it's Danny again. The case study I've chosen to critique in Chapter 11 was the very first one on the University of Texas in Austin, the University Tower shooting. The perpetrator ended up being a gentleman by the name of Charles Whitman. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the case study, and then I'm going to briefly discuss some of the articles that I was able to find online. All right, in the case study, Stage 1, you are the president of a prestigious university in a mid-sized town. Not very different than the University of Florida, which is a prestigious university in a mid-sized town. So something like this could, of course, happen as we just a tragedy on this scale. But you find out that there's a student who's not been doing well in class, and as it turns out, he shot a deer off campus, dragged it through campus into his dorm room, gutted and cleaned it in his dorm room shower. Obviously, university. It tells you, or the case study suggests, getting the dean of students involved as a first step. And this student should be referred to a counselor at the Student Health Services if the dean of student determines that this student needs help. What resources should you have available, or what resources should you acquire? You should do a review of your security measures on campus, and you should ensure that the police department is properly equipped. The issue with this is that at the time in 1966, a campus shooting situation, university campus police can prepare for this. As a matter of fact, the university campus police at the time in 1966 didn't even have weapons. All they were really able to do was cite traffic infractions. Stage 2, it's been reported that a student who is seeing a university psychiatrist has said that he wants to start shooting people. As it turns out, this was the same student as in the previous incident with the deer. It turns out after doing a little bit of digging that he had a scholarship through the U.S. Marine Corps, but it had just recently been canceled. What's your plan of action? At this point, you speak with the dean of students, as should have here. Your communication plan should involve or should include the chief of police as well as the dean of students. Stage 3. There have been several reports of a suspicious person wearing strange military-style clothing pulling a trunk through campus. This student had been interacted with a security who remembered because he did supply a student ID or did give him a student ID, and it turns out it was the ID. It was his ID. It said something about being a research student, so the parking attendant didn't think there was an issue. At this point, what is your plan of action? Campus police should be directed to find this person, and the vehicle of which the parking pass was given to should be investigated so you can try to find out who the person was who was driving the vehicle. Communication plan. At this point, you should, on top of the dean of students, also on campus in case that they see any suspicious persons or activity. Stage 4, an employee has spotted a suspicious person taking the elevator all the way to the top of the university tower with his trunk. What are your concerns? That there's no reason why any student, whether he's a research student or not, should be taking a trunk to the top of the tower. What's your plan of action? At this point, police and any employees inside that tower need to be alerted. Stage 5 of the case study. Shots are being fired from the top of the tower, with several students shot and taking over the. This is at this point, you should try or attempt to evacuate the area on campus. Also, that you should direct police, which this is probably pretty obvious, to stop the shooter. What's your communication plan? Students should be directed to find a shelter. In contact with to ensure that no information is not exchanging hands between the police and the university officials. Stage 6. State, county, and municipal police are attempting to shoot down the sniper. There are locals on campus who, because hunting is big in Texas, there are some locals who have high-powered hunting rifles in their vehicles, and they have been directed by the police to also shoot to try to subdue. Students are scattered throughout campus. throughout the courtyard along the tower. What are your priorities? Your priorities at this point are to prevent any more shooting victims. You want to stop allowing the situation to progress or get worse. Also, you should evacuate those who have been shot or injured or wounded to hospitals. What resources should you try to procure? What are available? Or use or borrow armored transports for first responders, any kind of armored vehicles, so you can get first responders to the patients who are laying on the ground, even with the sniper still shooting. Stage 6. Armored cars and ambulances are now reaching wounded that are laying and strewn around campus. 3. The tower report that there are people trapped at the bottom of the tower. At this point, what's your plan of action? You should communicate with anyone in the tower to advise them to stay put. At this point, it's safer to be at the floor level of this tower than it is to be trying to escape from the floor level through the courtyard to anywhere else, because that gives the sniper access to you. You should with all levels of police, local officials, as well as local hospitals. Stage 8. Sniper has been shot. Police communicate through a green handkerchief at a window. They've subdued the sniper. At this point, 3 dead in the tower, employees who were there when the shooter entered the tower, 13 dead outside, and 33 wounded. What's your plan of action? At this point, you should start thinking into the future, and you should improve security forces to protect security forces. This was an unprecedented event. There were really no protocols for something like this, which leads to the next point. What resources should you have for the future? Obviously, at this point, you need to formulate an emergency action plan. There was none in place before, which is why resources were minimal for a situation like this. What measures can be put in place to prevent anything like this? For starters, metal detectors in the tower, in the entrance of the tower, would be a good start. Key issues. As a university president, you should do a better job monitoring at-risk students. If you have a student that's showing any signs of mental instability, obviously he needs to be at least monitored. Administration should do whatever they can to back. These crime incidents are very difficult to predict and prevent, so you need to just increase campus security and student accountability. Items of note: prior to the shooting, this student also and white death prior to the shootings, and off and on since this in 1966. The observation deck on the tower has been permanently affected, and access is much more restricted, much less liberal. I found a couple articles online. The first one that I found called Monthly is named Joe in 1996 for the 30-year anniversary of the shootings. It mentions a few things. First of all, it mentions that the observation deck has long been off limits to anyone without a police escort, but the reason for that isn't necessarily the Whitman shooting. The real reason is suicide. Since that tower had been opened in 1937, 7 people have taken their lives by leaping from the top of the building. No one has jumped since it was in 1975, which was 8 years after the Whitman shooting. Also, it states that the legacy of the Whitman shooting spree can be felt in other ways. University of Texas had only security guards who mainly handled traffic problems, but after the shootings and the general social unrest of the 60s, they became officers licensed, which was interesting that at least at the time on campus didn't have a license to carry guns, probably because they didn't need them. In 1966, there were no SWAT teams, which going ahead, but no SWAT teams. Also, there was no sophisticated communication equipment, which is why police were kind of under-resourced. But also, the Austin police officers in 1966 didn't have the high-powered rifles that it took to probably shoot and subdue Whitman. This was pre-11, obviously. So communication was very poor between the tower and police officials during the actual shootings. That was the first article. The next article I found, also on Texas Monthly, it's called "The Madman on the Tower." It was written in 1986, which was 20 years after the shooting, by a gentleman named William Helmer. The reason why this article was interesting is a real long article, but it's a first-hand account by the author, William Helmer, who was a student on campus at the time, and he was discussing how initially he was walking through campus kind of unaware of what was happening, heard what he destruction of and power guns, and he didn't think there was a shooting. He walked across the courtyard, which later on he found out during the newspaper articles that followed this event, that many people were shot along the exact route that he had taken through campus to eventually where he stopped at a building outside of the shooting range. It was just really interesting firsthand. Last resource that I found, I added onto my submission here, was a YouTube video, a little 2-minute YouTube video that had some newsreel footage of the shooting of deck on the tower. Pretty interesting. It was crazy to see him actually shooting, where you see the butt end or the tip of a rifle going off outside of the observation deck. It's pretty surreal. And as we know, even today, when you have somebody who's mentally unstable, who has access to firearms, and has a reason to shoot and kill, it's really difficult to avoid situations like this. It's kind of like terrorism on any level. When you have a handful of people doing something evil, it's very difficult to keep them. The best we can do is try to mitigate as much risk out of any potential situation through accountability, through emergency action planning, and through security. And that's even where we're at today. We can't eliminate the risk of everything. We can just mitigate as best we can. Thanks, guys.